Wonderful. Excellent. So I would like to welcome you all to the second webinar of the Global Democracy Initiative. And for those of you who couldn't join the first event, just allow me to say a word or two on the Global Democracy Initiative. It's a budding initiative, technically it doesn't really exist yet, of like-minded organizations joining forces in pushing towards global democracy. And this webinar is part of a series leading up to the launch of the Global Democracy Initiative on the 29th of May. So join the party then. The objective of this series of series leading up to the launch is for the member organizations to get to know each other better, but also to start thinking more specifically about concrete milestones and specific areas of cooperation and coalition towards creating a global democratic system. Now, today's panel is devoted to a key dimension of global democracy, namely to global problem solving. And the objective of this panel is to learn more about how each organization approaches global problem solving and to start identifying kind of specific steps along the chain. On the panel, we have our member organizations, namely Global Online Democracy, Global People Power, Democracia Global, and GLOCO, the Global Community. And I'm not quite sure whether Democracy Earth is joining, but I hope so. In addition to the member organizations, I am absolutely delighted to welcome a special guest today, namely Simpol. So we have invited Simpol because they bring a lot of expertise and experience to the table with regard to thinking about and enacting global problem solving. And I think we from the Global Democracy Initiative can learn a lot from their experiences and their thought processes. So I'm absolutely delighted that you can be on board, John and Mette. So thank you very much for that. The format of the panel, maybe just a word or two on that. Simpol will start. They will be holding a short presentation, just sharing their approach with us. And then the member organizations will each have a short pitch talking us through their approach to global problem solving. This will be followed by a discussion within the panel, which we will then open up to the broader audience. And the audience, you will be invited to pose your questions yourself, but maybe it would be good if you could just put them in the chat, which will make it easier for us to moderate. Well, I'm not sure, I'm sure I've forgotten something, but I think you are all here to listen to the member organizations and especially now to Simpol. And I would like to invite Mette and John to kick off the panel and very much look forward to your input and presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy. Yes. Shall I just share my screen for our presentation?
Yes, please do so. And please, Lucy, can you give me a hint if my voice is very silent, because I had some problems with my sound yesterday?
I can hear you fine, and I think
great.
So
thank you.
No problem at the moment, anyway.
Okay, wonderful. So, so thank you so much for the opportunity to present Simpol, this simultaneous policy. It warms my heart so much to do this, because when I first met and joined Simpol, I so deeply resonated with the claim that we are dealing with a systemic root cause that goes beyond us versus them thinking. And also a thinking which recognizes how stuck we all are and what keeps us stuck. So please let me present to you our proposal to solve global issues.
Yes, so just carrying on from Mette and I going to alternate a little bit. Our approach is really to try to start from where we are, to accept where nations are. Some are democratic, some are not. And we have to sort of start from where we are rather than starting from where we want to be. And so for us, really, solving global problems is the primary issue. Not democracy. You know, there have been many occasions in the past, for example, the strategic arms limitation talks between democratic and non-democratic countries, which have nevertheless resulted in an agreement. So it seems to us that solving global problems is the primary issue, and democracy, although it's nice to have, is not absolutely strictly necessary. And for us, so we ask the question, so what's the barrier to solving global problems? What's stopping nations from cooperating? And for us, it's the vicious circle of destructive global competition, which is basically no nation wants to move first in any substantive way to cut its carbon emissions or to solve other global problems, because any nation that moves first will only harm its economy. And so the net result is that nobody moves, or nobody moves very much. And that's the roadblock that we're in at the moment. And so our solution to that is, how do we overcome destructive global competition? Well, for us, there are three elements. The first is we need all or sufficient nations to implement policies simultaneously. If nations act together, no nation would lose out. No nation need fear incurring a competitive disadvantage. Everybody would win. Secondly, we need a multi-issue policy framework so that what nations might lose on one policy, they can gain on another. And that's it's the lack of that framework at the moment, I think, which is one of the reasons why climate change isn't being solved, because the big losers on carbon emissions don't have any incentive to cooperate. And the final thing, and I think this is where Simpol can really offer your initiative some experience, is we need a way to allow citizens to use their votes in a powerful way to drive politicians to cooperate globally. And at Simpol, we do that when citizens sign up to Simpol. They basically give strong preference at all future national elections to politicians or parties that have signed a pledge to implement the simultaneous policy alongside other governments. So what we are trying to do is to create a framework for mutual trust across the world, regardless of whether nations are democratic or not, and to create a framework which invites them to participate because they have nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Yes, and I also want to tell you that yesterday John and I had a big laugh, because it is absolutely impossible to explain Simpol in 5 minutes. So please find out more about Simpol at our website. But in short, we see Simpol as a pathway to global cooperation via a citizen-driven global treaty. And for us, it is much more than just about solving the destructive global competition. It is also about that we are not just great competitors, but we are, as humankind, also supreme cooperators, and we want to underline that. This is about transcending the opposites and reconciling on differences. And we also believe that by doing so, we become more fully human.
Yes, so with the short time available, this new way of voting that I was describing has achieved the following results so far. So the last national election in the UK, for example, in 2019, we got over 700 candidates from right across the party spectrum to sign the pledge to implement SIMPOL. And of those, over 100 are now sitting members of parliament in the UK. So that's probably about 14–15% of the parliament. In Ireland, which has a different electoral system, more proportional system, 53 candidates signed the pledge, and of those, 17 are now Irish members of parliament. In Germany, a similar kind of result. We had 50 candidates signed, and of those, 11 are now members of the Deutsche Bundestag. And we have some pledged members of parliament in the European Parliament in Australia, Denmark, Luxembourg, and in Argentina. And in Argentina, that is indeed Fernando Iglesias. So Fernando has been a long-time supporter of SIMPOL. So really, that's just to show that if we're going to solve global problems, we need more than policies and democracy. We need nations to actually implement it. We need to get politicians to agree to it. Otherwise, nothing will get implemented. And so I think what SIMPOL can really, the experience that we can offer is, how do we get that buy-in from politicians? How do we get politicians to sign on to implementing global solutions?
Yes, and again, I want to say this more philosophical thing, that humanity has never been in this situation before, at least not at the global level. None of us know whether our plans will work or how we can be most effective, most fair, and most caring. We have to make the first steps together on a pathway that uses the systems we have, but in ways that take us where we need to go, even if much of the journey is unknown. And with these words, I deeply want to thank you for inviting us to speak.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Lucy.
Yes.
John and Mette, thank you very much. I think you've done a fantastic job, because you've been asked to do the impossible, which is not only introduce SIMPOL, but also kind of carve out how you approach global problem solving. And I think you've done a great job, and I'm sure I, for one, have many questions actually regarding that. What I take many things with me, but one thing is I love this idea of supreme cooperators. I hope if there's one thing we can learn from you, then it's to be a supreme cooperator. And then there's questions of how to bring nations on board to implement policies. So very exciting. But without much further ado, the other organizations have similar problems with regard to time. So if I may hand over to Global Online Democracy, and Asaf, I think, is already ready in the start box. So please, Asaf, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. Do you hear me? Hello, do you hear me? Yes.
Sorry,
okay.
I was on mute. Yes, you.
Okay.
Great.
Just checking. Yes. So hello, everyone, and thanks again for organizing this very important event. At the Global Online Democracy, we actually thought well and hard on which global problem to focus on in this webinar, like which problem will help us demonstrate the power of our model and the change it can bring to humanity and to the world. We have decided to choose climate change for a number of reasons. First of all, solving climate change is an extremely complex matter to solve. Climate change is tangled in human behavioral changes, in industry changes, and mostly changes in legislation, both global and national. We bring here more like practical, we try to see how to really, to show how really we are going to solve the global climate change. So if we manage to create a system that will help us solve this complex problem, it will open endless possibilities to solve any other global issue. Also, we choose the global warming because we think it is important to challenge our model. In our view, all governance models should be challenged from time to time, and our model will be constantly adjusted to match the situation of the world. The fact that we don't challenge representative democracy too often is one of the reasons why our problems are just piling up. As we already mentioned in the last webinar, our model of global governance is built on an online platform that aims to disrupt the political system of our time. Our goal is to build a platform that facilitates political decision-making online. In simple words, people add to the platform issues they think should be solved. They can be local, national, or global. Other people rank them on the platform into the order of priority, something that we don't have these days. Just think that we will have a list of problems to solve online that is prioritized by millions of people around the world. Also, our main goal is to integrate the brains of our world, universities and research centers, into the decision-making process. They will have an active part in providing information that will help the voters understand the problem and be able to make better, more knowledgeable decisions. The aim is to educate people, expose them to different narratives, different research made about the topic, and experts' opinions just before they vote. So let's imagine that you log in to your profile on the Global Online Democracy platform. You could do it via your computer or the app from anywhere you wish. You get a notification that now it's a crucial time to vote on how to solve global warming because the voting is closing soon. You click on it and you are being directed to the global warming category. Underneath, you find all the relevant solutions that has been suggested to reverse climate change, such as renewable energy solutions, air pollution prevention, carbon tax, animal agriculture and fashion industry adaptation to climate change, and many more. All those are already ranked high by other users across the globe. You click on the carbon tax and you are being directed to a page where you can vote for the best solution to apply to carbon tax. Before you vote, you find a short description, a video that describes the problem, the latest research on the subject, different narratives, experts' opinion, etc. You scan the material, and once you establish an opinion, you vote. After voting, naturally, you are being offered to explore another remedy to global warming, like the ones I just mentioned before. Once the voting period has ended, the decision will be sent to the national authorities alongside other decisions that has been made at the same time. We call it the Bill of Demands, and it will be listing all the demands made on the platform. So that would be the process on how to solve global problems using the Global Online Democracy platform. It can, of course, be used for any issue we are dealing with, from nuclear warfare, plastic in the ocean, overfishing, hunger, biodiversity, etc. Most importantly, a system like that can disrupt the politics as we know it and create a much better world for all of us. So this is in a nutshell. Of course, in such short time, it's hard to present all different aspects the model possesses, but I will be happy to answer additional questions later on. Thank you very much.
Asa, thank you very much. You've done a great job, actually. And again, one thing I take with me is that I think if Simpol are supreme cooperators, you may well prove to be a supreme educator of people. I love this idea that people are actually learning a lot and have really all the material in a user-friendly way to make an informed opinion and an informed vote. Excellent. And vote, this is now the next buzzword, which will take us to the global community, GLOCO, which is all about direct democratic voting on a global level. So please, Lars, may I ask you to shoot? Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation. It's great to be among like-minded people and like-minded organizations. I enjoyed already listening to the first two because I see the similarities that we have. In the end, we look at global issues and need the solution. GLOCO's proposal is a direct digital democracy that's based on a platform where we bring together tools for the different steps. So one of the key points is that we not only, a bit like ASAF and Global Online Democracy, don't only focus on voting in the end. In the end, it's important to see how many people support and how many people don't agree to this, of course, after a certain discussion. But it definitely needs some time to lead up to these ideas from the issue selection, finding out what is the problem, finding the solutions. And the question was, how do we propose to solve global issues? But what are those global issues that we should address on the global level? Well, Asaf already mentioned climate change. That's also very clearly on the list that we have here. Pollution, tax evasion, overpopulation. These are all issues that go beyond national borders and that we only can solve in a collective global manner. Of course, when we look at today, how can this work? Well, at the moment, it's not really working in many of the multilateral approaches that you see today. When you put a topic onto the agenda, you get the discussions, you try to find consensus, voting outcomes are fractured. Here, the blue ones voted in favor, red voted against, black was an abstention, and the gray ones decided not to vote. It's not relevant which treaty this was, but the problem is that there is a fractured situation, and well, like John said, there is sometimes a national disadvantage when moving along, when being the first one. You can position the country in a bad way, and then the government, of course, won't do it because they'll lose the next election. Other situation is that moving individually, seeing a gap moving forward is also something. Lowering taxes, I probably should take tax evasion as an example, because the country that reduces taxes will attract companies because it's a bit cheaper there, and then they'll get the tax incomes. So essentially, it's a free rider problem. But in the end, it needs global solution. But what it also needs is the discussion about these solutions, that it is fair for everyone. John, I think, alluded to that while you're addressing one issue, there might be needs to counterbalance this with a series of other ones, such that you get the leverage to get a global consensus. Just punishing certain countries because they move certain ways is something that we see today in the multilateral world, and it doesn't work. Finding the consensus is the key point in the end to find compliance. So GLOCO's proposal is really to also go to the people, and from the start, in terms of discussing the solutions, is bringing in the global perspective. Find out how we can ensure compliance, what the compromise has to be, and where the leverages are. And so for tax evasion, this idea of a minimum company tax would be something that would go onto this list and would have to be discussed. And then the discussion involving normal, everyday people from around the world that are interested, involving experts, like Asaf said, would allow or should allow on the discussion platform then to really find viable solutions, find out what could reach consensus, and then in the end put that to a ballot globally. And so my hope is that the future of the world does not look like this. It should look like this. It's individuals that decide collectively on how to get the right solution that can be a compromise, and that's the best for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars. And what a great world map that is. So GLOCO is advocating for global citizens to be able to vote and put issues forward, consolidate them, debate on them, and then also vote on them. Very exciting, and that brings us actually to global people power. And I think that's a very nice bridge to make with that image. So if I may ask Barnaby for your pitch on how to solve global problems. Thank you.
Hello. So thanks again to GLOCO for setting up the Global Democracy Initiative to enable its member organisations to embody what we ask of the rest of the world. That is, to commit to learn, collaborate, and to cooperate with each other despite our differences. My talk goes out in solidarity with Extinction Rebellion's Money Rebellion. Global people power is about supporting Earth citizens' assemblies to create global rules without global rulers. It's also about taking action to pull all nations together to implement Earth citizens' global policies in a cooperative, synchronized way. Earth citizens assemblies are randomly selected policy juries reflective of the social makeup. Here's some questions they would be asked, questions I have taken the liberty of replying to. Question 1. Name a few of our most urgent global challenges. The global pandemic was caused by environmental destruction and is further widening already feudalistic inequality. The ice caps are melting and the rainforests are on fire. Question 2. What are the systemic root causes of these challenges? The campaign Positive Money released a report in 2018 called The Tragedy of Growth. To protect well-being and avoid ecological disaster, we must abandon GDP growth and transform our economic system. GDP means gross domestic product. Kate Raworth, in her most excellent book, Donut Economics, tells us how in the 1960s, the creator of GDP growth idea described it as an aeroplane that was about to take off towards a utopian vision of high mass consumption, only they didn't provide us with a landing manual. Growth, when you have stopped growing, isn't the news you want to get from the doctor. Infinite growth on a finite planet means that we would deselect ourselves from the food chain. What drives GDP growth is the need to pay back the interest of money created as debt. My worldview was totally blown open when I found out that the money we use, 97% of it, is created literally out of thin air as debt with interest by private institutions we know as banks. The other 3% is created by national central banks as notes and coins. Wow, privately owned banks, some of which were built off the back of the slaves and drugs trade, get to own the magic money tree and rent to us use of their currency, which kills real trees. And when they undertake illegal practices which cause global economic crashes, we, the world's taxpayers, get to bail them out. Then it's back to brutal austerity for us and continued socialism for the 0.1%. My mind was twice blown because in seeing the systemic problem, I soon discovered the systemic solution. Question 3. That would be a question to questions to citizens' assemblies.
Just quickly, sorry, Barnaby, we're not supposed to be seeing slides, are we?
No.
No, okay, just checking, sorry, okay.
Just my noggin. Which policy would go furthest to tackle the broadest range of our most urgent global problems? About 10 years ago, I invited the Positive Money campaign to propose the sovereign money policy, it's easy for me to say, for a global democratic process that I was involved in. Here it is. 1. Private banks should be prohibited from creating new money when they make loans. 2. A nation's central bank, separated from the government, should create any new money that is needed in the economy and to give this as a debt-free grant to the government. 3. The government will be able to spend this newly created money in accordance with its democratic mandate. For example, a universal basic income, increase public spending on things such as wartime like carbon neutral remechanization and universal healthcare. Question 4. What are the key barriers to implementing solutions to those challenges? Sovereign money would need to be implemented by all countries so that they could all end the GDP growth imperative and fund a COVID and climate breakdown recovery and resilience plan. Positive money have made a strong case why sovereign money would increase a nation's economic competitiveness. Transnational corporations would benefit from investing in a country without a boom and bust economy, with a healthy populace and an excellent green infrastructure. But they also say that sovereign money would initially find itself up against powerful resistance from vested interests. Typically, networked transnational corporations rally together when faced with stiff legislation. They hold nations to ransom with threats to move their headquarters, jobs and investment to other more business-friendly nations. In other words, they threaten to destabilize a nation's economy. This is essentially a geopolitical weapon of divide and rule. We call it international divide and rule. Question 5, how do we decommission international divide and rule? Top-down only solutions would be co-opted by vested interests. Therefore, global grassroots solutions are needed too. Here's how. We need to hit the streets to recruit Earth citizens. Regular reports on the deliberations of Earth citizens' assemblies would inform the world about global policy solutions. There's me with a dry mouth. It would also shine a light on the system of international divide and rule and the need for global cooperative action. This could rekindle, broaden, and most importantly, unite the mass protests that were kicking off around the world in 2019, especially in the global south, where they have been resisting patriarchal, white supremacist colonialism for centuries. Also, at elections, Earth citizens can vote only for politicians who have become fellow Earth citizens by agreeing to cooperate globally. So, come and claim your Earth citizenship and take the power back, and I look forward to cooperating with you.
Thank you very much, Barnaby. As you know, I'm very taken with this idea of Earth citizens united, and I can see several linkages to approaches of other organizations too. But I don't want to steal the time from our, I think now, last panelist from the most established organization, actually, Democracia Global, who are working, I think, in a far more structured way with existing international organizations and institutions for global governance. So I'm very excited that we have Fernando Iglesias on the panel again, and I would like to hand over the floor to you, Fernando. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We have very good ideas about how to solve the problems of the world, but I couldn't solve the problem of my of my room and my background. I'm sorry. There is a problem with my camera. I can't change it. So basically, we have a short time, and yes, I am a supporter of simple policies, and I think this is a very clever. I've been in contact with John for a long time. Happy to see John here, but these are short-term necessary policies and strategies. We need to have also a long-term strategy, and I think very basic statements. First, we are living in a global society. A global society implies to have global issues and global crises. Global crises and global issues need global solutions. These solutions have to be democratic. That's something very simple to put the problem on the right way. What does it mean, the democracy? Of course, the participation of people in the decision making of the issues which affects their lives. And this implies also another concept, which is federalism, because it's undemocratic to have a centralized power deciding about everything, and we need a federal network of decision making in order to the citizens of a city decides about the issues and matters of the city, the same for a national state, the same for the regional level, the same for the global level. This is a basic idea of democracy, which is directly connected with the idea of federalism. And this is nothing new, because we can have very different opinions about the United States of America, but this union between democracy and federalism was at the beginning invented at the USA in order to cope the idea of a big territory, how to manage that. And of course, not just the United States, also Argentina and Brazil and Mexico and many other countries all over the world have adopted the idea of federalism. And now we have a federal experience, a work in progress at the supranational level with the European Union. I think these are the basic things we human beings have discovered. The powerful idea of connecting together democracy, a global democracy, and federalism, a world federalism. We need to put this at the global level in order to cope with this kind of issues. And the key in this sense, in my opinion, is the idea of institutional building. So democracy and federalism means basically three powers, Montesquieu, you know, the executive power, the legislative power, and the judiciary power. And we need to apply these tools we have experienced and developed both at the national and the regional level, at the global level. And now we have very embryos of this kind of things with different degree of democracy. But remember, when national states, the executive power of national state started to be something real, they were not democratic. They were, you know, the kings and the aristocracies and etc. The usual way is a power starts and then it democratizes, not the contrary way. So we have very embryos of executive, legislative, and judiciary power. We need to empower them. At the same time, we have to have a battle in order to democratize them. I'm speaking about the G20, the G7 at the executive level. I am speaking about the General Assembly of the United Nations at the legislative, which is some kind of Senate of the world. We need to complement this with a chamber. I mean, and there is an initiative, United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, and also the judiciary level. We have the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court. All these are embryos at the global level of this kind of institutions. We need to manage global problems. I think we need to empower them and democratize them, and this is the idea of institutional building. Eventually, we need to create another ones. For instance, as I say, the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, which is a long campaign it has going being over for about 10 years now. Well, let's think in a very short way some typical global issue like climate change. It's okay. We can implement simple strategy, but who is going to deliver a directive, an idea, a law, whatever about how to regulate it? Let's put that the solution, or at least a part of the solution, is the carbon tax. Well, we could have, if we were able to create a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, the parliamentarians all over the world, like me, could go there and we could discuss there about different solutions we could arrive to the conclusion that the solution is carbon tax, whatever, and then we could deliver this idea in order to modify or to influence the next G7 or G20 meeting or the next agreement, international agreements on that. But at the same time, we could use maybe an instrument like simple simultaneous policies in order to apply that. And this could be something really new, because we need the citizens all over the world to be aware of the magnitude of and the impact of these global issues on their lives, and the possibility of managing them through political tools, and the importance of applying to these tools the principles of democracy and federalism, which most of people all over the world respect. We can have a long discussion about what democracy is, representative or not. I'm for the representative democracy. I don't think the Brexit is a good example that referendums and direct democracy are very problematic at the global, particularly when we use the conclusion at the supranational and global level. But we can discuss about democracy, but democracy is a principle which is, I think, a basic agreement, an increasing agreement for the citizens all over the world to participate in the public debate and public decision making. Well,
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think we might want to launch into the discussion in a minute. Did you want to just give one final sentence, or? Yeah,
this is in the long term. At the same time, we look for solutions. The short term, we need to have a long-term strategy. This is, in my opinion, institutional building. It means to apply democracy and federalism at the global level, which means not only the worldwide, it means also regional, it means also national, etc. And this is, I think, the way in which we all could collaborate with each other in order to have a better world, at least a world, because it's like some federalists say a long time ago, one world or none.
Thank you very much, Fernando. Really insightful. And I think there are a couple, I mean, there are many things I take away, but one is actually the way that Democracia Global and also the young world federalists who are also at the table, you know, how you connect individual citizens with national political institutions, with regional and global political institutions. I think that's very exciting. And also your focus on institution building. I think that is really, really important on all levels. And of course, you are far more established and advanced than most of us. We're all babies, not even doing our first baby steps, but just learning to sit up. Thank you very much to all the panelists. I would like to actually start the discussion amongst ourselves. So this is not going to be very rigid, or please also feel free to kind of cross ask your fellow panelists if you have any queries. But there is one thing that I think we should kick off with. We're talking about, global solutions and actually building systems in which we can address global problems effectively, be that through democratic or other means. That is really, at this point, I think by the side, it's more about the effectiveness of these solutions. And we've heard very different approaches. Now, I would like to ask you, with the hats of your different organizations and with your own experience, what are your specific next steps? What do you see as the most, not what is the most important problem, but what are the next steps that your organization feels it needs to tackle most urgently? And that can be, you know, within the organization, you know, what is it that you as an organization need to address in your own development, maybe, to be able to kind of become more impactful. Maybe you have, the more established organizations may already have very specific issues that they are addressing. And what are these? So I'd like to open up, please feel free to just launch into the discussion, whoever wants to start.
Lucy, thanks for asking that way. If you would have asked how long will it take, I think we would all have to say that it probably takes a decade to really get this change. But the first steps I think we have to do now.
I think you're optimistic, Lars. I like a decade. We say not more than a decade. We want to be ambitious here.
Well, and if it's a generation, then it's still something that we can look forward to, that we get towards these solutions. I think we have to take smaller steps. In terms of GLOCO, I think the thing that we should try out is really getting this discussion started for finding a solution. Picking a good topic, climate change might be a good one because it's currently of high interest, and then see how we could find these mechanisms that we find so important, that there's a consensus and that essentially everyone can be on board, where they might have disadvantages and might have to give up certain styles that they have, but still get towards a compromise and see what they need in exchange for these aspects. I use tax evasion as an example, but to compensate for the loss of taxes in certain countries, but perhaps they just need additional support and new business models. We have to start now. That's the key point.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I know that GLOCO still has a lot of work ahead, and I'm very excited to be part of the team, kind of getting down to the nuts and bolts of building that system. Yes, please. I don't know, Asaf, you've got you're unmuted. Maybe is that a sign? Should I? Did you want to jump in?
We are a very young organization, and of course we have all the let's say normal problems that all the organization has, to find for finance and find volunteers and how to get ourselves away from the net of working every day and have enough time to do the things we need to do in order to build the organization. But I would say that our first challenge maybe will be a little bit different than most of the organization here, is to build the system. The system that we are talking about should not only manage what people vote, it should also manage the decision making inside our organization. So in order, I don't want to be the only one deciding in my organization. I want everyone to vote democratically on what needs to be done, on how to market the organization, how to recruit volunteers, on what kind of feature to build first, and how to manage this whole system. Because I don't see it as my organization. I think it needs to have a bottom-up approach, and I think that's the main thing that we want to do first, to build the system that will facilitate the decision making, if it's voting on things outside the organization or voting inside the organization.
Thank you very much, Asaf. Yeah, I think that's a really important point, actually, the sort of organizational building and the capacity building within the organization, and making sure that it's broad-based as well and has some kind of sustainability and traction as well. Barnaby, you're unmuted too. Does that mean that you're chomping at the bit, raring to go?
Yeah, I was just trying to remember the name. There's Yuval Noah Harari, who's written *Sapiens* and another. It's like a grand look at the whole of human history, and his books have sold millions, and they've been read by world leaders as well. And he talks about the need for global cooperation and global governance, and he says that it doesn't. He says that the transition was only 100 years ago between small states to nation states. It happened quite quickly, and he said he doesn't see any reason why it couldn't happen again. And I think quite quickly, and I think that the whole movement needs to find the essence which will encourage popular support for it. So something that, which is why I like the idea of Earth citizenship. There was on the BBC, they did a big survey asking people in countries who are increasing their GDP and growing their economies, that they are seeing themselves more as citizens of the whole world, whereas countries that are post-industrial have they're significantly decreasing their outward look, and that's reflected in the rise of authoritarianism around the world and the far right. So that's why I'm optimistic. I think that this could and should happen in the global South, and that it should be reflected in our communities as well. We need to set up people's assemblies, citizens' assemblies, locally, nationally, and globally. And that will encourage the whole world to think systemically, and then the needs for global cooperation.
May I ask Mette and John, just from the perspective of Simple, you know, I mean, also in the background of what Barnaby's just said, you know, I do think that's really interesting. And if I understand correctly, you work with citizens' assemblies as well. And I'd just be interested to hear from you where you feel that this kind of leverage can be generated.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. I mean, just before I go into that, just on the general point, I think, you know, yes, I think the world is moving or will inevitably have to move towards a more global approach. But I think right now, you know, there's an interim step that's needed. And the need for that interim step is very clear from the tussle that we are seeing in the world today between nationalism on the one side and globalism on the other. If we try to rush too quickly towards globalism, we will just meet resistance. And therefore, I think the trick, the interim step is, how do you make global cooperation in each nation's self-interest? And in that way, you bridge both of those polarities. You transcend and include them, if you see what I mean. And so I think that kind of approach, if we could articulate more that kind of approach that is supportive of healthy nationalism, but also supportive of global cooperation in every nation's interests, you bring those two things together and you dissolve the tension. And so I think that, you know, just as a general comment, that would be the thing. Just to, on your other question, Lucy, we regard Simple itself as a kind of potential citizens' assembly, but one that has teeth because of the voting process that we are using that drives politicians to compete with each other to support Simple. If citizens sign on to Simple, they are automatically part of that citizens' assembly. As compared to regular citizens' assemblies, which are usually just advisory or consultative, they don't have any real power. Simple has that power through the voting process that I explained earlier. So I think it brings both of those things together as well.
Very interesting and thought-provoking, John. I'm not sure whether everybody would agree that I do know some organizations want to go straight for the global level. Others, and we have it in the chat, the Young World Federalists, positions say, you know, there needs to be some kind of resistance. I read that as there needs to be some friction and irritation. Also to sensitize people, to wake people up, to kind of get people, to jolt people into kind of engaging constructively in these debates as well. Yeah, very interesting, I think, to see how you're using Simple as a way, again, to join the dots between citizens, politicians, and political institutions on a national, regional, and global level. Slightly different approach, of course, to the World Federalist Movement, Anti-Democracia Global, but still really interesting. I'd like to invite the audience as well. Any questions you want to ask, just raise your hand, please. We have moderators scanning the audience. You can also put it in the chat if you want. But if not, I'd be very interested to hear, or while we're people can sort of lay out their own questions. One thing we were discussing, you know, as we were preparing for this webinar is we're very good at thinking about where our strong points are. So each of our organizations, with whatever aims that we may have, with whatever architecture we kind of are constructing, we're very good at thinking about how well we do things or selling our kind of strong points. But I'd actually be quite interested to hear from you where you feel that your weak points are, in the sense that, you know, there may be some unique selling proposition that, you know, one aspect which you are really strong at addressing. But of course, that may mean that other aspects, you know, maybe issue collection, maybe global deliberation, maybe effective implementation, maybe global cooperation, you know, there may be aspects which are either neglected or just not covered by your organization. And I'm interested in this, of course, wearing the hat of the Global Democracy Initiative, where we are going to have to, and where our whole objective is to actually start cooperating together in effective ways, both by creating synergies, but also making sure we cover the kind of weak spots. John is right in there. You've already raised your hand. Please, John.
Yeah, I think where Simple is weak is exactly where ASAF is strong. We would very much benefit from the kind of online democratic decision-making software systems that ASAF is developing, although we wouldn't use them in the same way that we wouldn't use them globally, but we would use them nationally to support policy development at a national level with a view then to a global negotiation. So I'd be interested to talk to ASAF maybe separately or later. Thank you.
I think the best place is to speak here. I like everything to be transparent. I would say our platform is separated to local, national, even neighborhood level, and then come the city, national, and global. The decision making, you cannot make a global decision without dropping some legislation to the bottom levels. It will hit everyone. And also in the lower levels, you want people to engage in decision making. So, for example, I would like to have the parents in the class of my child to agree on some guidelines of how to use mobile phones, what kind of phone to buy, up to how much money to spend, what kind of apps they will have on their phones, to make some kind of same levels, to not have child that has everything and child that has nothing. Also, I would like to have a platform that can get senior people to talk with one another and to tell the city what they need to have a better life with one another. So of course, here we are talking about global, but the model of the global online democracy is completely not global. Is how to solve decisions or how to solve problems with mutual decision making platform, and it doesn't have to be also like legislative. It can be also personal. So you can also use it when you need to decide something with your wife or with your friends. So because we were thinking how to get people to use it, you know, because this is, if we talk about the weak points of the organization, our weak point is this, that if no one will use it, we will have a system, but nothing will happen there. But if we give it as a tool for people to make decisions, and if you create structure, technological structure to get the biases of that we have in our mind, many times we make decisions that are not rational. So all these things you can make technical, you can make them technological. And yes, so this is where we are. This is our weak spot, and but I hope that we will solve it like that. Once we have a system and we give people the possibility to engage and make decisions on local level in the city and national, global, I hope it will work.
It's very exciting, I think, that we now do have these digital technologies to address these problems. Of course, a lot of issues are not solved yet, but that's what we're all on this, getting together and thinking about them, and actually also hopefully cooperating on them. Before, there are questions coming in which are actually relevant to the issues that John and Asaf have raised, but before I open up, I'd just like to give Lars the floor.
Yeah, I wanted to continue on that thought with the digital platforms, because that's also one of the key points that we see from the global perspective. And not the point that I would add is that not only the engagement or the interest might not be good enough at the moment, definitely the digital divide across North and South is something that will hamper the participation around the world. And this is why we probably can't move to that directly. But we're not alone on that, and the United Nations definitely have that on their radar. So we will have to collaborate. Anyway, GLOCO is small, so small that I see half of the members here in the chat, and that's the point. But the collaboration aspect is clearly there. And the key point from our perspective is that we get to know more people that know the tools that already exist. When you think about the current discussion in Europe, this conference on the future of Europe, they are also using a digital discussion tool that's based on one of the existing tools. And pushing this forward and seeing how this works is, I think, the opportunity. And so the networking is something that we have to go there. And Asaf, it's definitely the challenge that we get the people involved. When I looked at the European platform yesterday, there were 5,000 people involved only. And the number of citizens that the EU has is markedly higher. And so the engagement is something that we'll have to work on jointly, definitely.
So it's interesting, there's a question actually that's come in on this, because I do think, I mean, there needs to be more outreach. For traction, there needs to be outreach. Each of these organizations, and I think, you know, especially Simpol showed this very nicely, also Democracia Global has its unique pressure points, which it is targeting to kind of not just create traction, but to kind of push the system towards effective implementation and you know, addressing global problems. But I mean, I think we're all aware that we need a much greater outreach and buy-in of whatever you want to call them, Earth citizens or constituencies or whatever. And I'd like to invite, I'm just looking at the discussion here, the chat, and I'd like to invite David Gallup, because you have a question on what you call exponential, exponential growth in awareness. So please, David.
Yeah, hi, I'm David Gallup. I work in an organization called World Service Authority. This is our 67th year in existence, believe it or not. It was founded by a man named Gary Davis. also known as World Citizen #1. There's a great documentary about him called The World is My Country, which you can actually see here in the United States on public television over the next several months for free, the hour-long version, but you can go to theworldismycountry.com to see the full version. And I bring up Gary only because I worked with him for many years, but he did have, back in 1948, 49, and 50, the whole world viewing what he was doing and creating, at that point, exponential growth in interest in this idea of both world citizenship and world federation, that we need to resolve or solve our world's problems, but we need to do it simultaneously by building the governmental institutions at the world level to be able to do it. But I've seen our growth sort of stagnate. Although during the pandemic in the last several months, it's actually sort of dramatically increased, like Eston said of the Young World Federalists, because I think the pandemic has made us realize that we have one world and that we have to, my point is that we need to raise universal awareness of our human rights and rights of the earth, or environmental rights, before we can even get to universal respect for those rights. And as a human rights lawyer, that's really important to me, to be educating the public about our rights. But how do we do that and engage people, both young and old, in this process? And that's really been, I think, part of the problem. And I was just about to write it in the comments, but I'll say it. And that is, I think I'm so delighted that these meetings are going on, because I've seen us so much in our own silos, doing our own work in a specific area of universal awareness of our rights, or of changing the world to make it a better world. But finally, I see us all working together. I'm working with Eston McKeague and Nicholas Rowe with the Young World Federalists also to try to raise awareness of what we can do together. So I'm just hoping we can move out of those silos and unite the peace, justice, human and environmental rights movements all towards working together.
Thank you very much, David. That's great. Well, we're hoping to walk towards that. I'd actually at this point like to invite Nicholas Rowe to maybe, would you mind sharing the experiences of the Young World Federalists? If what are these methods that have proven to be quite effective then in the past few months? I think we'd all like to learn from them, actually.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you very much.
We advocate for more effective and accountable global governance, namely in the form of world federalism, which calls for the empowerment and the democratization of international institutions like the United Nations. YWF itself is a pretty new movement, founded about a year ago, but we've had a lot of success in the past few months raising support and bringing people in, volunteers, members, donors, all sorts of supporters, by focusing our efforts on marketing, on social media, and generally online platforms. It's a pretty crude form of raising support. It's nothing like demonstrations or running a campaign or those sort of things, and we have plans for all of that. But just by running Facebook ads and running ads on YouTube or on Instagram or on Twitter, we've managed to amplify our message and to reach thousands of people with it. I think in the past few months, the people who have seen our advertisements are probably, I think, more than 500,000 people. And so it is a very effective way to get your message out there. And these ideas they may not have mass support, but there are people out there in the world who agree with them. And so it's a matter of finding those people, and the ideas will do the rest.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Very exciting, and actually congratulations that you have managed to, create that kind of traction as well. I mean, when I was always shocked that 2008 and the global financial crash did not create a more sustainable change. And so I'm unfortunately a little pessimistic that COVID will kind of shock people into action. But I think it's up to all of us to kind of dig in there and make sure these experiences actually do result in a change of attitude and of being together, and a sense of what Mette was calling, being human as well. How do we want to be human in this world too?
Good.
Sorry.
No, if I can make, I wish to make some comments if you don't mind.
Please, Fernando. No, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Well, nice to see so many people here. Nicolas, who is working very hard with young federalists. Also, David, I lost my passport. I had a passport from about 20 years ago. I need a new one. I used to be a very close friend to Troy Davis, Gary's son, and this is a very interesting initiative. And I recommend everybody to know the beautiful story of Gary Davis, the first citizen of the world. This is something very encouraging and very funny. And he was
I want one.
What?
I want one.
Yeah.
Yo quiero uno.
Yeah.
Una.
Of course. Everybody should have the global passport created by Gary Davis. This is very good, a very good long-standing initiative. This is something which is very good. Well, I want to make some comments about the pandemic. This is something which is, in my opinion, crucial. I mean, it's the first time maybe in the history of the species we have shared such a strong experience all over. There was a moment in which more than half of the people were in the situation of lockdown. And this is a shared experience that we as human beings, as humanity, didn't experience even in the case of the world wars or any other. This was something very strong. And I am afraid to say that we didn't manage very well. We were not able to put this basic question. This is a common problem. We need to have new strategies in order to cope with this global pandemic, and we need to reinforce maybe the health organization at the level of the United Nations, whatever. But we need to learn from this experience. And I mean, that's why I think it's so important. My favorite initiative is about the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. But I have to say, I wish not to be so ambitious to have a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly delivering about all global issues, everything. But maybe we need something very connected with the pandemic or directly connected with climate change. These are very, and why this is so important to me? Because changes are not, so I'm a member of the Argentine parliament. I'm a politician, I'm sorry. I mean, but I know that the political environment is conservative. The people who has the power wants to keep the power. And the best way to keep the power in the hands of the people who have the power is keeping the status quo, don't move, don't make waves, just stop it, you know. This is Machiavelli. Machiavelli says this in The Prince. Well, the change has to come from the people, from the citizens. And we need to put the people at the position of first reflecting about the problem. And I'm afraid most of citizens of the world know the problems we are facing, know about the problem of climate change, financial instability, pandemic, whatever, but they don't have in their minds, the majority don't have in their minds the possibility of looking for a global solution for these global problems. That's why a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly will be also, if we fail to move the thing in favor of carbon tax or Tobin tax or whatever, that will be a very important step in order to raise the question of the political power at the global level. Who is making, this is Carl Sagan, Cosmos, who is making decisions in the name of humanity, in the name of the planet. We know, Carl Sagan say, who is speaking on behalf of nations, but who is speaking on behalf of Earth and humanity. And this is the crucial question. We are not moving the situation even for tactics measures as simultaneous policy or institutional building in the long term if we don't have the majority of humanity pushing and moving forward the agenda. And that's why I think United Nations Parliamentary Assembly is a very, very important tool, not only in order to apply solutions, but in order to raise the question about global problems need global solutions have to be democratic, and the citizens have a voice on this. This is something which I think we should reflect. Maybe my answer to the question is wrong, and maybe it's not the UNPA, maybe it's something different. Robert Whitfield is working in a transnational working group on artificial intelligence. And maybe we should, so the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly should express first about artificial intelligence, which is the most disruptive thing going on in the planet right now, as Yuval Harari has raised the question. But I don't know if my answer is the right one. But I think we are not, the basic statement should be, we are not going to change anything without the participation of the majority of human beings. And at the present situation we have not been able to raise this problem for the majority of human beings. Let's think about that.
Thank you very much. Oops, I've just lost you there. Oh, that was the end. Sorry about that, Fernando. Thank you very much, Fernando. So I think, you know, how to use these extraordinary times to also, you know, further the agenda of whatever it is, global democracy, global problem solving. I think, Geir, you wanted to say something, is that right?
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to also, first of all, I would like to thank all the participants to participate in this webinar, and I'm really excited to hear the big support for the Global Democracy Initiative that we heard several times in this meeting. And I think that's the very important thing, is that we work together, because very similar ideas, very complementary ideas also that are represented here in the different groups. And I think the most important thing, and I mean, that's the main goal of the Global Democracy Initiative, is to find out what great tools are already existing and to bring those pieces of the puzzle together. Because I mean, there's already world passports for many, many years. There's already so many platforms where you can have debates and find good global solutions. And I think it's really now the time to bring together all the great things that have been there already. So, and I'm super excited that this is happening and that you all support this so much. I mean, the one question I maybe have to Fernando and in general to the United Nations Parliament Assembly is whether it's not a problem that you start from a national side again, or maybe I didn't understand the UNPA enough, but don't you think that it might be again a problem that you will be voted for as a representative of a country if you go into United Nations Parliament Assembly, and then maybe again are not free to look at global problems from a global perspective, and rather will again go into the pattern of first trying to solve your nation's problem, just very much as politicians that are in the UN today. That's maybe one question I have to the UNPA, and the other one I have is it really realistic that the big states that have all the power today will say yes to something that might have even more power? So those are the two questions I have to the United Nations Parliament Assembly.
And maybe actually also Simpo wants to jump in there too, because I know that you have some answers to some of those questions.
not necessarily. Sorry, what do you mean, Lucy? Sorry, I didn't quite understand.
So one set of questions I think is going to Fernando with regard to the UNPA, to the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, but also how one can then counterbalance, maybe the power and the sort of self-interest of nations too. I think that's where maybe Simple's approach comes into it.
Yeah, yes, that's right. I mean, I think Gary's second point about the major powers will do all they can, I think, to frustrate the UN Parliamentary Assembly having any real power. And it seems to me that's one reason why we need to mobilize citizens' voter pressure to ensure that national governments can't do that. And so with Simpol, we are looking at developing global policies that governments would have to adopt and would, because of our citizen voter power, they would have to adopt them. And that would sort of neutralize the problem of just trying a purely top-down UN kind of solution, where I think the US and others will do all they can to frustrate it. So we need to frustrate them from the inside, if you see what I mean.
Fernando, did you want to respond to Gary's question?
Yes. About the strategy of the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, it's a very wise strategy that Andreas Bummel, the director of the campaign, established from the beginning. The United Nations General Assembly has the power to create consultative agencies by the vote of the simple majority. So you need only a half plus one vote at the UNGA in order to create the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly as a consultative body. But the power of this consultative body, imagine that parliamentarians go there, start to discuss, and they decide by the vote of majority, unanimous or not, that the carbon tax is very important to cope with the problem of climate change. This has something about, this speaks to people about democracy. Your representative is going there and delivering. Of course, we are going, this doesn't mean that carbon tax is going to be applied. And to John, I think we are too much used to be our strategy as contradictory. I think they are complementary. Think about a global discussion about carbon tax at the global level, at the United Nations, and everybody pushing their governments to put something on the table and to implement simple, simultaneous policies. So this is something which has to work together.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, Fernando. It is complementary. But I think, the point I'm trying to make really is that with the citizen voter power and the way that Simpol harnesses it, you have the democracy there with the power to drive, to compel national governments, the democratic ones, to implement global policies. So in a sense, my question is, why have a consultative body when you can have one that compels?
Well, because we are dealing with a global issue, and if we are going to create, for instance, a tax, there is a powerful principle about no taxes without representation. If we are going to impose a global tax, this is connected with the idea of global representation. And that's why we should put this on the table. And on the objection about the national interest of parliamentarians inside the UNPA, that's correct. This is a very important, but think about this. All the supranational parliaments started by being parliamentary assemblies, not like the European Parliament at the beginning was not created with the participation of European parliamentarians, but it was created on the basis of national parliamentarians going to the, and this is an evolution we had also here at the Mercosur Parliament and the Parlatino. There are national parliamentarians going there. In the process, when you start by this kind of parliamentary assembly, that's why it's not, the name is not World Parliament, it's United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. It's not a parliament, it's a parliamentary assembly. But if we put this on the top, it's very logical to think that the process that we had at the European level is going to repeat. So from national parliamentarians and no real legislative power to European parliamentarians and real parliamentarians, real capacities for legislative power. At this moment, the European Parliament has not the power of initiative, so they have to put proposals to the European Commission. But this is a work in progress. We are not going to have so basic a big change in a minute.
Thank you very much.
The problem is to start the process and to put on the table the question of democracy at the global level in order to have popular participation and to change the things. This is my basic concern.
This is, I think, very much, I'm afraid, because we're coming towards the end here, very much work in progress. But one of the keys which has been raised here, and I think, put on center stage is, regardless of how we do it, whether through kind of representation or direct popular power, whether we use kind of classic conventional political instruments, like voting for a member of parliament, or whether we're using new and maybe more radical forms of political mobilization on the global level. I think the real question is, if we're thinking about how to solve political, how to solve global problems on a global level, that is the interest that we're focusing on now. We will need to join forces, but we will also need to identify ways in which we can really exert real power, real traction, which will need masses, it will need numbers in there. I was very taken that Simpol, for instance, although you use, if you will allow me, I mean, it's a very ingenious way of approaching the problem, but at the end of the day, you're using very classic methods by going through members of parliament, right? But there too, numbers are all, you need a critical mass of representatives bringing your ideas into the national parliaments. And we will need the masses, be it us as platform or the voters of the global community, GLOCO. We will need numbers to translate that. And I think that's what we are hopefully all working towards as well. So I'm afraid we've probably raised more questions than we've answered, but to be honest with you, I'm very impressed actually with just in this very small round that we brought together here, the solutions and the answers that are already on the table. So these are not just rhetorical questions. This is not thinking aloud, but, we are already bringing together here a lot of expertise, experience, and excellent ideas of how to approach these problems. And so, I am confident. I know some people are less confident, but Lars, I think he said within the next decade, we want to see a real dent, that's probably the wrong metaphor, but we want to see real progress in solving global solutions. Greta Thunberg wants it earlier, and I'm in Greta's camp, I have to say. And yes, what is the time frame, Barnaby, exactly? 5 years. If you ask me, it's 5 years. If you ask others, a little bit longer perhaps, but we need to be much more ambitious, and we need to bring our efforts together. So I would like to, at this point, thank all the panelists again. I would like to thank especially Simple for having joined us and shared your experience and expertise with us. I would like to thank the member organizations of the Global Democracy Initiative for sharing your time and energy. And of course, I would like to thank the audience, and I'm very sorry that we couldn't engage all the people who were interested in debating. But I would very much hope that you will join us on the 29th of May for our last webinar, our last event, which will be just before the launch of the Global Democracy Initiative. And that is where we will be identifying very specific areas of collaboration and hopefully concrete steps and milestones as well. So thank you very much to everyone. Take care, stay safe, and be passionate about global democracy, global problem solving. But many of us are passionate about global democracy as well. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Lucy.
Thank you,
Bye.
Lucy.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Great
Nice to see you all.
webinar. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Right.